to all the Korean War veterans for the freedom we have today. We appreciate you, and when we grow up, we will never, ever forget you.
Okay, now I'd like to have all the Korean War veterans that are here to please stand. And if you had somebody in your family or a close friend that maybe was killed in the Korean War or missing in action, I would like you to stand also. Or maybe you're here, somebody's out of town, and you would like to honor them. Stand. And we'd like to ask all the ladies, they have a ribbon for you, and it's a small token of the appreciation that we as Americans have for you, because we know our freedoms today that we have are a result of your service and your sacrifice to our country. You should all be proud of what you did in your service to our country, and we all appreciate you. Thank you. And he's been calling me Daisy. He's said he's been driving Miss Daisy. So I've been calling him Walter. But he has been a great help to me, and I'd like you to give him a round of applause because he's been great.
Thank you, Kathy. I thank each and every one of us here from the bottom of our hearts are truly appreciative of all that you have done. We're honored to have here today to speak to us Judge Richard Kettler, who is a Vietnam War veteran, having served in the United States Air Force. Judge Kettler.
Thank you very much, Ed. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and most of all, my fellow veterans. Great to see you here. I told Kathy Rich just yesterday that I was especially pleased to be here. There's a member of the Korean community that has just been extremely important to me and to my family, and on his behalf, and I was hoping like heck he would be here, Kathy. I guess he couldn't make it, but I'm referring to a doctor. And if he weren't so instrumental in my life, I'm not real sure I'd be here today as a judge. I'd be standing up in front of you with 4 healthy children. So I have a real debt of gratitude to the Korean community, so thank you. The summer of 1950, June, July, August, I can remember it. You remember it? Yeah, I think it was hot like today, wasn't it? I can remember it so vividly because I'm not sure, I think I was 7 or 8 years old. And maybe I should add before I sail off here, I've had to follow a congressman, a senator, and a governor. It's a tough act to follow, and I don't have any proclamations in my hand either, Jerry, so I'll do the best I can. But I can tell you I can remember 1950, and I remember it so well. And I see some guys out there with gray hair that I think maybe remember it too. I remember because my mom was crying. My dad had just gotten out of the Army Air Corps in 1946. My then baby brother Scott was born in February, and in June and July and August, I can remember I grew up above a grocery store over in Canton, and we had a map out, and I remember my mom, it was out of Collier's magazine. I'm looking at that map, and where was Korea? Never heard of Korea. But my mom was convinced, first of all, my dad was going to get called back up, and was just as convinced that World War III was going to start. There was no doubt in my mother's mind, and she really did spend a great deal of that summer crying. Congressman Regula made reference to Harry Truman, certainly the great president at that time, and praised his courage. Kind of in preparation for speaking today and get the flavor, I read a wonderful book by an author named Max Hastings, and in that book he reported that on June 25th of 1950, President Truman went to bed. Before he did so, he entered in his diary that surely World War III had started. Now, World War III certainly didn't start. My father didn't have to go to war, and I think eventually my mom stopped crying. But it is a testimony to you, the gentleman that had stood up twice previously, that World War III did not start. Certainly with the benefit of hindsight, we can see not only did the Korean War serve that purpose, that is to stop communism in its tracks, it served the positive force of the genesis of the miracle that has become South Korea, that community to which I owe so much. So maybe what does go around does come around. No question that you gentlemen served that purpose. Another interesting statistic I'd like to share to you with you from that book. We've heard several times, there's no question, there were 54,000 casualties. You know, around the world, if not today, later in the year, Mr. Hastings reported in his book that there is a museum for the Korean War in Peking, China. China celebrates the Korean War. And they celebrate it, and in their museum it is noted that they claim to have killed 1 million or more than 1 million Americans in 1950 and throughout the Korean War. You guys must have been tougher in hell if they thought that it took 1 million of them out. As a combat veteran, I salute you. 54,000, we can't, nothing I can say, nothing any speaker can do this morning can erase that memory or ease that pain, but it wasn't 1 million. It was 54,000. We honor them today. We honor them throughout the year. And we honor them, of course, with that national memorial that will be dedicated in July later this year. Kathy asked me really to stand up here, not so much to revisit Korea, but to speak to you, I believe, as a Vietnam War veteran. There are so many similarities. Mr. Hastings, in his book, I think rightfully called the Korean War the last campaign of World War II and the first campaign of Vietnam. Last one of World War II, first one of Vietnam. I think he's probably correct, with one major difference that he repeatedly pointed out, that unlike the guys that I served with in Vietnam, you truly didn't know who the good guys and the bad guys were. I think maybe you guys had that luxury. The indigenous South Koreans were on your side. There is no question about that, and they still are. But we did share very many similarities, and I'd like to discuss them very briefly, and again, play credit to you. I think you've had to serve in a war, and I think my father, my grandfather, and yours as well. Since the turn of the century, just about every generation of American boys has gone to a map, maybe in Collier's magazine, the Repository, or National Geographic's, and said, "Mom, I got to go to France. I got to go to that island in the Pacific. I got to go to that place called Korea, or that place called Tam Kỳ, Vietnam." Like mothers throughout the 20th century have maybe shed tears in their kitchen because guys like us had to ship out. I can remember, and I'll never forget, and I know none of you will, that numb feeling. I took an airplane, maybe you guys took a ship to Korea. I don't remember, I was numb. I think I can share with you what it felt like to wake up in the morning once I got to Vietnam. And what am I doing in this strange place? I think I can share with you that feeling of a mixture of like nausea and adrenaline when you knew you were going to see some combat that day. Most of all, I think I can share with you that heartache when you came back and you knew maybe you didn't have a letter from home, hadn't heard from home. Home forget about you? They didn't. That's why we're here today. The other thing I can share with you as a Vietnam veteran that I think unfortunately the Korean veterans suffered as well, that once we got back, once we served our tour at whatever foreign post it was, that unlike our fathers and our grandfathers, we were met maybe with apathy, certainly with misunderstanding, in some cases, downright hostility. The Vietnam veterans, I think we were very, very fortunate. Our wounds have healed, and I think they have healed in large part because of the wall dedicated in Washington, D.C. almost 13 years ago. I salute you, Korean War veterans. I commend you for doing likewise. I think it brings closure. I think it brings healing. I commend you for that. On a more personal level, and in closing, I want to do two things. First of all, I've said that my father and my grandfather did serve with Eddie Rickenbacker in World War I. I've got 3 children, 3 boys. They're 28, they're 26, and they're 16 years of age. They've not had to sit down in a kitchen with my wife, their mother, and point to a map. My wife, their mom, hasn't had to cry as our sons have shipped out. And I want to thank each and every one of you guys from the bottom of my heart for that. If not for you guys, I think we'd be in that kitchen or wherever in Canton, Ohio, or throughout this great country, looking at a map and crying. And finally, as a Vietnam veteran, we have a unique and a special way that we will greet fellow veterans. And I want to extend that to you. And I do it in court. It doesn't make any difference if I'm a judge and they're a defendant. It doesn't make any difference if you were a grunt or a remp in our war. If you come back from our place and we see you, especially after the wall, especially after the dedication in July, and especially after this wonderful ceremony today, again, I want to thank you personally, because my boys didn't have to serve. And as a Vietnam veteran, I want to welcome you home, brother. Welcome home. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Kepler. Let's get that beautiful children's choir back up here at this time. I'd like you to come back and sing that song one more time. Well, there's some people out here that would like to join you. Thank you. That was certainly better the second time. Those costumes are beautiful. We'd love to hear them again, but the show must go on. It is certainly my privilege to introduce to you our keynote speaker this afternoon, Harley Kuhn. He is an ex-POW from the Korean War, being held 33 months in captivity. He is currently the National Director of the American Ex-POW Association, National Director of the Korean War Veterans Association, and he is a 1994 inductee into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame. I'd like to present to you Mr. Harley Kuhn.
Thank you, Ed, Kathy, Major, fellow veterans, ladies, gentlemen. It's an honor for me to speak to you today. We have the National Memorial being dedicated in Washington, D.C. On the 27th of July. We've also have a
Raymond A. Crawford, Uniontown. Ronald P. Pescovitz, Canton. William C. DeVault, Canton. Samuel J. Donahue, Robert J. Fox, Canton. Robert L. Fox, Canton. Willard R. Fox, Maslin. John F. Fugat, Sr., Alliance. Calvin D. Gamble, Canton. Bob A. Gause, Canton. Raymond D. Griffin, Canton. David N. Hall, Canton. Paul G. Hampue, Alliance. Jr., Canton. James F. Hayden, Minerva.
Before Reverend Jim comes to the church, would like to invite you to a banquet in your honor. There is no charge for this banquet and everyone is welcome. Maps are located on the tables if you need them. The address is printed on the front of your program. We would like to thank everyone for coming out today and hope you've enjoyed this program. And now Reverend Jim to offer the benediction.